Okay guys, this video is for entertainment and education purposes only. Any and everything I say could be wrong. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Alright guys, when I do videos and talk about stuff, I'm telling you, nobody's talking about what I'm talking about. Watch. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to show you right now. What I'm going to talk about right now, nobody's talking about. I want anybody to show me one person that's talking about what I'm about to tell you right now. This is, so Epstein is the big thing, right? The big news, man. Everybody's upset. Everybody's talking about it. It's big news, man. Epstein, right? Right? So this is the big thing, man. We can't avoid it. Angry Hobo can't avoid this topic. We got to talk about the Epstein, right? Because it's the big thing. Okay, so let me first let me set the tone here. So we're gonna talk about the Epstein files, Epstein Island, and all this stuff, right? You got the P. Diddy that came 3 years later, and this has been an ongoing story long before Epstein surfaced as a big thing. There's all kinds there, especially back in the earlier days of YouTube, like when I got on and I really started really looking at YouTube rather than just watching, a music video or something. I really started digging around on YouTube. Dude, there's a lot of documentaries about old ones from like the early 90s and shit about all these fucking back before they had the term sex trafficked children. Back in the 90s and shit. Like, they had really good documentaries about how all these politicians, in the U.S. are fucking just, sex trafficking children and shit. Big politicians, right? All this stuff. So it's not like Epstein is this new thing, right? Right? You know this, okay? Anyways, let's get to it. Let's get to this, okay? So what I'm saying is it's not just Epstein. Like, this has been a developing story over a long period of time. And Epstein is just one of them. P. Diddy, like, whatever, right? So this is big stuff, right? And then also, like, take for example. Well, this is one thing I want to kind of look at. I want to explore in this video with you, if you're watching, is the movie Sound of Freedom. Remember the movie Sound of Freedom? The Mel Gibson movie that came out, and everybody made a big deal out of it because it's this groundbreaking, like documentary style movie about sex trafficking, right? Okay. So what I want to do is let's just do it from a layman's perspective. Just kind of do a scan, like in a general way, like what is going on with all this, right? So to set the precedent, let's talk about it. You got to look at it in terms of the top 10%, middle 80%, and the lowest 10%, right? It's the top 10% that are doing all these operations, these big sex trafficking operations. And again, like I said, they were putting out really good documentaries about the top 10%, doing all this sex trafficking stuff back before the term sex trafficking even existed. They used to call it child molesting. Anyway, And like I said, there you could find fucking crazy documentaries that were made like in the early 90s and the mid 90s and shit. Crazy documentaries about sex trafficking that were made back before the term sex trafficking even existed. And these are documentaries about the top 10% that are trafficking children for sex. You're probably more aware of these documentaries than I am. Because like, I was living on the street while all you guys have been hanging out on the internet, doing all your deep dives into all this information. While you're doing all your deep dives from the comfort of your own home on your computer, I'm out eating fucking out of dumpsters and getting chased by cops and business owners. So you're more aware of these documentaries, these older ones than I am, that came out in the early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s about sex trafficking. Before the term sex trafficking even existed, they used to call it child molesting, right? Well, why did they, first of all, why did they change the term from sex trafficking to, from child molesting to sex trafficking? Is it to create some kind of hype for money? You know, what? Because remember, it used to be called child molesting. And then, don't you remember when the term sex trafficking first started circulating? It became a big hysteria. We have an epidemic of child sex trafficking, right? Sex trafficking. And then all these new organizations started popping up all over the United States of America. All these organizations started showing up and that are going to fight sex trafficking because you have this massive sex trafficking epidemic. And all the statistics started pumping out and getting circulated. And all the politicians started that became the politicians' platform for their campaign was, we're going to fight sex trafficking, said the politicians on their pedestals, for their platforms, for their political campaigns. It all became a big thing, like lots of hysteria, lots of hype, lots of politicians standing on the podiums, pitching their political campaign of how they're going to stop child trafficking, sex trafficking. And they're creating bills, new bills to vote for this bill that's going to fight the sex trafficking, and lots of money started circulating. All these organizations popping up everywhere, all these sex trafficking organizations designed that they're non-profit organizations that are going to fight the sex trafficking, and all this money starts going around. Government grants start circulating because the United States needs to have these nonprofit organizations set up all over the country to fight sex trafficking, and so they need money. Federal money needs to get circulated to fund all these organizations that are going to fight sex trafficking. Even law enforcement was getting lots of federal money because the law enforcement was going to go out and get those sex traffickers. Lots of money, lots of big talk. The politicians, big talk, big bills are getting voted on. The bills that, the fight sex trafficking bills all over the country. The politicians are that's the platform for their campaign, is we're going to fight these sex traffickers. We're getting money to law enforcement. They're going to catch these. Remember, you guys don't see, were you paying attention to all this? Or were you watching bum fights? That's what you were doing. When all this was going on, this was all just boring political bullshit to you. So it was more entertaining to watch bum fights. Is that what it was? Is that what you were watching while all this is going down? You're too busy watching bum fights and playing video games, right? Gotta love them millennials, man. Gotta love them millennials. They're the ones that gave us bum fights, And now they're all getting paid to play video games. Gotta love them. So anyways, sex trafficking. All this sex trafficking, right? And, what's going on? So let me ask a few questions. All these years, because this started back in 2008, the sex trafficking hysteria. Just like, remember the say no to drugs hysteria? Everybody's a drug dealer. Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan are going to get all the drug dealers, the drug traffickers, because we got this big drug epidemic. It's a drug war, right? And so lots of money had to go around, man. You know how much money there is in the drug war, bro? Well, now, starting around 2008, it's the new war is the war on sex trafficking. And so lots of big money's going around. Politicians are platforming their campaign on ending sex trafficking. Everybody's sending money to the nonprofit organizations who are fighting sex trafficking. Tons of money going. The federal government is all this federal grant money is going here and there. The law enforcement is getting a huge share of all this federal grant money to fight sex trafficking. Well, what happened with all that? The big sex trafficking war, the war on sex trafficking that has started it started in 2008. It's been this big sensational thing, but have they ever caught any of these sex traffickers? So, well, if they haven't been catching all these sex traffickers since 2008, but then all this money, all this federal money is going to law enforcement, nonprofit agencies, organizations designed to fight sex. If all this money is going everywhere, because sex trafficking is it's an epidemic plague of sex trafficking happening all over the country. And all this money is all these years since like 2007, 2008, all this money is going to fight the sex trafficking epidemic and catch the sex traffickers. Have they ever caught any of them? Do you ever see them catch any of these sex traffickers? Nope. Okay. So, so it's like, so what's going on? Are we getting informed about any of this? Like, what is this all about? Sex trafficking, what is this all about? Are we getting the facts? Have we been getting the facts about this since this hysteria started in 2008? No, well, a bunch of lies have been spread about it. That's for sure, But that's okay. It doesn't matter because we're fighting the good fight, right? So anyways, so now fast forward to, 2022. Of course, everybody's still talking about sex trafficking, even though nobody's ever done anything about sex trafficking. They haven't caught any big sex trafficking rings. All this money that's going to law enforcement to catch sex traffickers. Well, the law enforcement hasn't caught any of these sex traffickers, but this hysteria about sex trafficking continues on and on. All these sex trafficking organizations that have popped up all over the place, getting all this federal money, your tax dollars. None of them are saving the sex trafficked children or doing any what's going on with all this? And then you see the news stories of these organizations that got all this money for their sex trafficking organization, and it turns out to be some corrupt organization where they were all stealing the money and they're all liars. And then it gets publicized on, local news channels across the country, all these fake organizations, But yet this whole narrative continues on, right? It continues on and on. Despite all this money going all over the place, no sex traffickers are ever getting caught. And where's all this sex trafficking money going? If they're not catching the sex traffickers and sex trafficking is just getting worse and worse, well, where's all this money gone over all these years? All these federal grants of tax dollars that are funding all this war against sex trafficking. Where's all that money gone all these years? They're not catching the sex traffickers, right? Okay, so then you get the big movie, Sound of Freedom. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, the Sound of Freedom. Mel Gibson is coming to save us, right? Mel Gibson is coming to save us with this great Sound of Freedom movie that's going to tell everyone all about what's really going on with sex trafficking. So now let me ask you a question, because you got to think of it in terms of the top 10%, middle 80%, and lowest 10%. Okay, so who is sex trafficking? Who are the ones sex trafficking? It appears to be. What? Oh, I'm sorry. It appears to be coming from the top 10%, the Epsteins, all the Epsteins and Gates and the Prince Henry or whoever the fuck. It's all these top 10%ers are the ones involved in all this, right? That's what it appears to be more than anything else, as the narrative continues to unfold, right? Isn't it those evil top 10%ers, right? So let me ask a question. Since y'all agree the Epsteins are all up in the top 10% and the P. Diddy's and all the big top 10%ers are the ones having all these big freak-off parties, right? And Epstein Island freak-off parties. It's all these top 10%ers, right? Generally speaking, okay? So where are all these people getting the children from? Have you ever thought about this? Where are all these children coming from? Have you watched the movie Sound of Freedom? The great movie Sound of Freedom? Exposing the truth, right? Who is exposing the truth on this child sex trafficking thing? Who? Like, I don't see the expose. I don't see. All I hear is that the top 10%ers have these big, Epstein Island operations and big freak-off parties. So if you believe this, where are they getting all these children? And, you can reference the movie Sound of Freedom because it's this great movie, right? Have you ever seen Sound of Freedom? Have you ever seen it? So like, according to whatever limited amount of information we have, because we're not being told anything except for that the top 10%ers are, stealing children and throwing these big Epstein Island freak-off parties. But we're not being told, like, where are these children coming from? So what, are you just, so you are going to assume that, where are you going to assume that these children are coming from? And then all we have to tell us the narrative is, the great Sound of Freedom movie, right? Mel Gibson's Sound of Freedom is going to tell us, expose the truth, right? As to where are all these children coming from? So if you're thinking it in terms of the top 10%, middle 80%, and lowest 10%, are you starting to get a feel for where I might be going with this, as to where these children are coming from? So let me ask a question. So you think that the top 10%ers are getting all these children from the middle 80%? Is that what you think is going on? Is it? Think about it. Have you ever thought about where are all these children, sex trafficking children victims coming from? So the top 10% is just stealing them all from the middle 80%? Is that really what you think? Have you ever thought about it? Where these children might be coming from? Have you ever watched the movie Sound of Freedom? Where are you getting your intel from as to where these children, where are they extracting these children? Like, you got the top 10%, right? And they're orchestrating these big Epstein Island freak-off parties. But the children have to come from somewhere. So have you gotten any intel as to where these children are coming from? Has your intel source told you that all these children are getting extracted from the middle 80%? Is that what you've been told? Or have you even been told at all? Do you have any intel to extract from? Where can you get any information as to where these children are coming from? Where? Where are you getting your intel? From the movie Sound of Freedom? Well, let's look at the Sound of Freedom. If you haven't watched it, I've watched enough of it where I can tell you what the movie Sound of Freedom is illustrating where all the children are coming from. If you're to think of it in terms of top 10%, middle 80%, and lowest 10%, which of these three do you think the movie Sound of Freedom is illustrating where the children are coming from? The top 10%, middle 80%, or lowest 10%? Think about, have you ever thought about this? Because Epstein is the big story, isn't it? So let me ask some more questions. So you think that the movie Sound of Freedom is illustrating this picture that the children are coming from the middle 80%? You think that that's what the movie says? Does it matter? Does it matter? Does it matter what the movie says as to where the majority of all these sex trafficking children are coming from? Does it matter? Yes or no? Everybody claimed that it really mattered a lot that movie Sound of Freedom came out. Well, why does it matter so much if it's just a movie? Right? Is it exposing the truth about sex trafficked children? And if it is, even if it is somewhat, again, where do you think the children are coming from? If you were to think of it in terms of top 10%, middle 80%, and lowest 10%, you think that the sex trafficked children are coming from the top 10%? That the top 10% is having babies and then sex trafficking in them? That's where the majority of the sex trafficked children are coming from, is the top 10%? Or do you think it's the middle 80%? The middle 80%, the ones that the top 10% always talk about how hardworking you all are and how innocent all the middle 80% are and how hardworking they are and how the top 10% is going to do all this stuff to help the middle 80% because the middle 80% are the salt of the earth and all that. That's where, so they're getting them from the middle 80%. Well, maybe, have you ever thought about that the top 10% are getting the majority of the sex trafficked children from the lowest 10%? Does it matter? Does it matter? What if the top 10% were getting the majority of the sex trafficked children from the lowest 10%? Would that matter? Okay, so I'll do a spoiler. This is a spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the movie The Sound of Freedom. See, when they made the movie The Sound of Freedom, they accidentally leaked the truth that the majority of people don't want to hear. And that accidental leak of truth that the movie Sound of Freedom put out there is that the majority of the sex trafficked children are coming from the lowest 10%. They're stealing them and extracting them from the lowest 10%, which would explain why the top 10% would manufacture poverty, is so that they can have this low 10% of people that everybody ignores, so that they can steal all the children and bring them to the island to have the freak off parties. Because who cares? Did the middle 80% even care at all about the lowest 10% at all? We all know the answer to this question. Stop pretending that you don't know the answer to this question. The middle 80% don't give a fuck about the lowest 10%. So that would be the most logical answer as to where are the top 10% getting all these children from. They're getting them from the lowest 10% because nobody pays any attention to any of the people in the lowest 10% anyways. Which would explain why the 10% manufactures poverty. That would be one of many explanations as to one of the reasons why the top 10% would benefit from manufacturing the lowest 10%. Then you've got this whole mass of people that nobody gives a fuck about, everybody fucking ignores, And if you watch the movie Sound of Freedom, watch it for yourself. All the children are poor. They're all come from poor and homeless families. And they steal, those are the children they're stealing. Okay, so you got Sound of Freedom that accidentally leaked this information. They didn't really think about what they were doing when they released the movie. Because if they were to have thought about it, it would have been better to not leak the truth that the majority of sex trafficking children are coming from the fucking lowest 10%. Because if that's the truth and that gets leaked out, well, then that's a big component of the Epstein story, isn't it? But see, the truth never matters anyway. So the truth is never a big component of whatever the latest story is. So it doesn't matter if the truth is that the majority of sex trafficked children are coming from the lowest 10%. Do you think anybody's going to care and do a big story about it and say, hey, everybody cares about Epstein, right? Well, check it out. They're getting all the children from the lowest 10%. Do you think anybody's going to care? No, everybody's going to be like, shut the fuck up. Nobody cares about that. Or they'll pretend to care. Oh, that's really crocodile tears. The middle 80% are great with pushing out crocodile tears, right? Oh, those children. Oh. But then, of course, they're going to blame the victim. Well, those lowest 10%ers, if they weren't in that pod, then maybe those innocent children wouldn't have to go through that. Yeah. See how all this, it never ends. It never ends. So again, so you don't really have much to go off of, because where's the facts as to where are all these sex trafficked children coming from? Are they releasing any of the facts at all? Like all these years since 2008 when sex trafficking became the big thing, have they ever really talked about where are all these sex trafficked children coming from? And really, if you just have common sense and you use logic, that it makes the most sense that they're getting all the sex trafficked children are coming from the lowest 10%, because those are the people that nobody gives a fuck about and everybody ignores. So if the top 10% want to get away with sex trafficking children, that would be the most logical choice. Get them from the lowest 10%. Not only that, if you go back to these documentaries that used to circulate on YouTube back in 2015 and stuff, these older ones about child molestation that came out before the term sex trafficking was ever even uttered. Look at those. Look at the documentaries on these sex trafficking rings. These old documentaries from the mid 90s and shit. They're all poor children. They're all kidnapping them from what do they call that? Where you adopt children, that whole, what is that called? Child Protective Services, where they have all these kids and they're all locked up in fucking, what do they call them? Boarding homes and stuff, all these orphans and children that were taken by the Child Protective Services and all these homeless youngsters, all these homeless youth. Those are the ones that are getting targeted by the sex traffickers. In all these and it's interesting how these documentaries are a lot harder to find than they were back in 2015 and 2016, shit like that. So anyways, so again, you got to think of it in terms of the top 10%, the middle 80%, and the lowest 10%. If you want to talk about some big story like Epstein and P. Diddy and all this shit. If you want to talk about stories like that, you got to think of it in terms of top 10%, middle 80%, and lowest 10%. So, this is what I'm saying. So you want me to believe, like you think that the majority of all the children being sex trafficked are coming from the middle 80%, huh? The middle 80%, the ones that all the attention is always on the middle 80%, and how they're all just innocent victims. Kamala Harris is going to do all this stuff to help the middle 80%. Trump is going to do all this stuff to help the middle 80%. All this shower of promises, all these politicians are going to do all this stuff to help the middle 80%. All this attention to the middle 80%. and all this, like everybody ignoring the lowest 10%. Where do you think all these children are coming from? I know I made my point, and I know my point is over the target and spot on, and I know I'm the only person saying this, and I know all these fucking liars, these internet influencer liars, they're never gonna talk about this. Even, they might even see my video, and instead of looking at it and going, oh, I might need to cover that because I'm the Corvette Report or True Stream Media. You know what? Nah, never mind. That's not gonna reach my target audience, because my target audience is the middle 80%, and they're not gonna want to hear that the people most victimized by these massive sex trafficking rings orchestrated by the top 10%. Those people most victimized by it are the people in the lowest 10%. My middle 80% audience isn't gonna want to hear that, so I can't speak that truth. You know, I'm not a truth speaker. I'm a preacher at a congregation preaching the religion of the middle 80% and how they're all the innocent victims of this Epstein Island sex trafficking shit, right? Anyways, there you go. There's some, you know, you want to talk about Epstein, there you go.